Perfecto, buenas tardes a todos. Esta charla se va a realizar en inglés. No se preocupen si hay algunas cosas que se les escapen. Yo creo que posteriormente vamos a ver de lanzar el script de lo que se ha hablado y lo que se ha charlado y tratar de subtitular el video en YouTube. Al momento de las preguntas las pueden lanzar en castellano, ya sea en el chat, las pueden hablar y se las traduzco si es necesario. Caso contrario, se las pueden presentar en inglés. So I'm going to welcome our next guest. She's Yana Chapka from Ukraine. Right now, going around Europe to relax a little bit near Christmas and visit some friends. She loves QA. She's here as a special guest from a really unusual side of the world to be with us. So welcome, Yana. Feel at home here, and the scene is all yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining, for being interested in my presentation. And so let's start. A few words about myself. So I live in Kyiv, Ukraine. I worked on different projects in different spheres: recruitment, healthcare, games, construction, and my current project, well, it's actually a product company. It's e-commerce. It's a big B2B platform for fashion brands. I also enjoy volunteering. I previously volunteered in Women Who Code organization and in BQA Today organization, and I already have an experience of giving presentations at international conferences. So as you can see, I was presenting in different countries, in Moldova, in Hungary, and well, the one in Germany was not in person, unfortunately, because it was very COVID time. So yes. Yeah, and I enjoy both giving talks on technical issues and non-technical issues. So today we are going to talk about end-to-end responsibility in a team. So I'm mostly going to talk about soft skills, about non-technical sides, and so on. So first of all, I would like to raise the topic of what we usually consider as responsibilities of QA engineer. And I'm going to generalize a bit because, yes, we have some clear definitions in the ISTQB syllabuses and so on, that we have these clear definitions of who is tester, who is analyst, who is test manager. But in reality, I think most of us combine all of these roles at our positions, and it all depends on the project and on the product you're working on. So let's generalize for now. First thing that you probably do is you analyze requirements. Well, how deeply you work with them depends on whether you have business analysts or not at your project, or how well product owners are involved into requirements or not. So these factors affect your involvement into requirements analysis, testing, approval, and so on. The next one is planning testing. This is where we come to test strategies, test plans, and so on. After that, we move to writing test documentation, which could be pretty high level, like checklists with no specific test data, or low level test scenarios. After that, you prepare test data, which can be pretty specific, and it's not something that you need on every project, but for some of them it's really crucial. Like, for example, on my project, so it is e-commerce, and we need some specific sets of products. So for us, preparing test data to have our regression testing before release, it's really important to have a big set of data of products that have some specific features and so on. And yeah, actually testing. Reporting test results which is important to learn about mistakes, to communicate to all the stakeholders who are interested, and to make some further decisions. Again, it's not necessary that you will do it, but we are generalizing now. So that was a quick overview of what generally you might do. It's not, it's not essential that you will do those things. You might do something more and something less, but that was it. And now let's move to main topic. What extra responsibilities can you take at your project? First that came up to my mind was dealing with configurations. Let me give you an example. Recently at my job, we had some change requests from one of the clients. We have something like an account selector for shops, where you can search for a shop by account ID or by shop name, by address, and so on. And the configuration for this search was starts with. And so when users were searching for, let's say, street name and were using the second word, then the system would not find the shop they were looking for. So they made a change request to update the configuration and to use contains instead of starts with. And you can do that. Like the configuration file is something that you can change pretty easily. You just then push it to Git and that's all. Configuration is not something too complicated. That not something that needs a lot of code review from your developers. And well, of course, it's not necessary that you do it, but if you see that it's some very simple task and that it's doable for you, then why not taking an initiative and like not creating one more task in backlog for your developers. The next one is dealing with translations. So nowadays, when products are globalized, we have many projects in AT which are localized. And for that, you need translation tools. And the selection of translation tool depends on your project, on your budget, on what technologies your project uses, and so on. On my first project, we were using just our customized admin panel, and we developed our own tool for dealing with translations. On my current project, we are using a tool called Localize. I don't know if any one of you worked with it before or now. So it just has the translation keys, placeholders, and you can enter translation there for different languages. Then the language file gets updated and so on. Again, you can do changes which are related to translations. In my case, we give our clients access to these translation tools, but not all clients want to deal with it. Sometimes they're just lazy, sometimes they don't have time, and so on. So if they ask you to update some translations, you can do that. The next one is monitoring performance. So it's good when you have a dedicated SRE department, which is monitoring performance for the company, but it is possible that they are not there for you, or they get fired, or they just leave the company themselves. And you might also take an initiative into monitoring performance and being the person who is responsible for alarming the whole company when something goes wrong. the next one of my favorites, you can be a Scrum Master. Well, it can be pretty fun. You get hold of the meetings, you are the boss, and it is especially cool when you are punctuality freak, when you don't like that people get late, that people are not organized, and so on. So at my company, at some point, I got so frustrated that my product owner was getting late for every stand-up that I said, okay, I will be Scrum Master now. And I started from stand-ups. Then I started conducting sprint plannings and then groomings, and started showing demos and so on. So that is also something that a QA engineer can do. Yes, the next one is sprint planning. So as a QA engineer, you have a good overview of what job your developers were doing, your team was doing in the previous sprints. And based on that, you can analyze what job can be doable in the next sprint. Yeah, the next one is release management. This is about conducting release assessment meetings. What else? About analyzing hotfixes, approving them, communicating to clients about any delays in the releases, and so on. And it can even be some bug fixing. If, for example, there is some bug in admin panel, and you don't need any code changes for that. So you might think, why at all should I consider doing this extra work? What is in this for me? Why is it profitable? Why should I care about doing these extra responsibilities? And the first thing, and I find it pretty cool, is your increased visibility. So it can be pretty hard when you're working for a big outsourcing company and there are many projects and you are just on one project out of many. Yes, it's hard to be visible, but still you will gain more visibility inside your project. If you're working for a product company, it is easier because, well, product companies sometimes are not that big and everybody knows everyone. So, well, to give you an example, I work in a company which is like 40 people. So once you get more power, people know you and people trust you. Yeah, this one is related to the previous one. You have more influence on the product. Again, this is more relevant for product companies because when you're working in outsource, your decisions pretty much depend on what your client wants and not on the vision of your own companies that hired you. So what actually influence means here, previously we had an example of this extra responsibility as conducting sprint plannings. So if during sprint planning, you as a QA think that, well, again, as I said, I think that QA engineer has a very good overview of developers' capacity. Because you have all the knowledge about the tasks they have been doing before, their speed, and like some usual mistakes that they do. And based on that, you can push some decisions or push back some decisions on whether we proceed with some feature or we don't proceed with it, or we change it, or you have some deep knowledge of the product, you understand how some systems of some parts of the product work. And based on that, you can push or push back some decisions. The next one is growing hard skills. So when previously I was mentioning what extra responsibilities you can take, I don't know if you noticed, but they were pretty different. So like dealing with configurations, translations, or something like that would be going to hard skills. And that is probably something that you could then use in your CV for hard skills section, because you were using some new tools and so on. And such things as sprint planning or being a Scrum Master would go to soft skills section. Yes, so the next one is soft skills, which is very important in our current society. Again, I don't know about your region, but for example, in Ukraine, we as a nation have a very big problem with soft skills. So our clients usually say that Ukrainians are good technically, but very bad from the point of view of soft skills, because people are too straightforward. People don't know how to resolve conflicts effectively, and so on. So, well, you can think of what you're good at as a person and as a representative of your country. And you can think on what extra responsibilities you could take that would make you your soft skills better. And so growing these hard skills, growing soft skills, gaining this visibility and power, it means that in the end, you will get much more choice in your future career. So why does it happen? First of all, because when you gain this visibility, when you gain this power, it means that more people will like to work with you. It means that they will recommend you to work for some other companies, probably, or not necessarily. They might recommend you for some other projects which you would be interested in. It also means that if by any chance you are not interested in testing anymore, it will be easier for you. Let's say you want to become Scrum Master. You tried it and you liked it. And if you already had such responsibilities as Scrum Master while you were having your QA engineer position, it will be much easier for you to switch. The next one is flexibility at the workplace, which I actually mean that let's imagine a situation. It's Christmas holidays soon, and many people will take vacations. They will be not available, and there is a possibility that some people responsible for some things will not be available. And so when people in the team are interchangeable, when you can do some things which are usually not responsibilities of QA engineer, it means that it will be much easier for your team to go through this time. Or, well, Christmas was a very positive example, but there can be also some negative one, like people leaving the company, or company firing people, and it would also affect some teams. And it is always good when a team can have some support from its members in terms of hard skills and soft skills. Yeah, so this one about team becoming an independent unit goes naturally out of the previous one. So I find it pretty effective when your team can do everything in its areas that this team controls by itself. Again, probably it is more relevant for product companies. For example, let's say we have a platform like e-commerce one, shop, and you have a team which is responsible for buying, a team that is responsible for looking at your past orders, having some PDFs, Excel experts, and so on, and then the team which is responsible for promoting, for marketing. Then if each team has some things which are dependent on other teams in whatever aspect, it means that if the other team doesn't have enough capacity, or if someone from the other team leaves, and all of that other situations that affect the workflow, your team is helpless, and we want to avoid that. So it is good for the team when it is so powerful that it can manage most of the things by itself. And yeah, in the end, well, we work to get money, to get paid, and then to spend money on things that bring us pleasure and happiness. And all of the things that we were mentioning, growing hard skills, soft skills, gaining visibility, gaining power, being influential, this is all in the end will bring you more money, because this means more lines into your CV, and not just lines, but proved by your real skills, and this is always good. So what problems you might face when you start taking these extra responsibilities, if you decide that, okay, yes, I want to go beyond my usual responsibilities? First of all, which is the most obvious, is that your testing process will suffer, especially if you're the only one tester on the project, or if your team has limited capacity. So, of course, there shouldn't be any situation when I don't know, you have to do your regression testing, but you are stuck into some translation issue. You should know your priorities. The next one, the next problem you might face is no defined zone of responsibility. So there might be a situation when let's talk about translations. So you do some task for the client dealing with translations, you do it once, you do it twice, third, first time, and so on. And then everybody in the company or just in the team gets used to it, that you always do it. And then one time when you don't have time for this extra activity, for this extra task, you don't do it, and then no one does it. And it gets lost somewhere in backlog, and then client is unhappy. That could be avoided if at some point you had an agreement that, okay, now I'm responsible for translations, so all tasks for translations should go to me. Or you're saying, I can take these tasks from time to time, but I'm not going to be responsible. So when there is no defined zone of responsibility, it means that, everyone is a bit good at everything, but in the end, no one is very good at anything. because in the end, everybody will think that this is not my responsibility. This is the responsibility of that person, because that person was doing it last time. But that is not true, because what was done last time still was not a responsibility. It was an initiative. And in Ukraine, we have a saying that initiative is punishable. So be prepared that once you take an initiative, you will be maybe punished next time, because you will be asked, but why didn't you do it this time? You did it last time, and you will have to justify yourself. So be very specific. When you realize that you really like some activity and you want it to be part of your, let's say, set of responsibilities in your position, then you have to make it clear to your team. Lack of proper prioritizing. Yeah, like we had this example with testing. So still, as a QA engineer, you have to prioritize your QA engineering activities first, and then everything else. But if you start looking at too many things at once, then you do nothing, because you are prioritizing wrong things. And then when managers will ask you for reports or why something bad happened, then what will you do? You will say that, well, I could not perform my QA duties because I was doing something else. That is not professional. So proper prioritizing is essential in this case. And poor analysis of your skills and capacity. You might be very excited about something. You might be really interested into something. Still, unfortunately, it doesn't mean that you are good at it. And when you start some new responsibilities, sometimes you have to have some trainings. It's natural. It's fine that you don't know something. But it's again about prioritizing and risks, and that you do the training if it's needed in advance, and that you calculate the time properly so that you don't start some new activities when it's hard time for your team, for the project in general, and so on. If you're thinking about starting some new responsibilities, then do it when it is a very calm time, when there is no production release tomorrow, and when there are people who can help you or can back you up if anything goes wrong. So do not, well, at this point, maybe do not think too high of yourself. Be more, I don't know, think of yourself as a more small person. Learn more, think of yourself as if you were in school. When you take more responsibilities, and especially when I was writing this one, I was thinking about release management. I will give you an example. So I started conducting release assessment meetings. And in this meeting, we go through the list of tasks we had this sprint, what is completed, what is not, what problems we have, what risks we have in general for this release, what hot fixes we expect, and so on. And as the one who is leading the meeting, I have to ask questions to product owners, to team leads, to whoever responsible for things we were discussing, and demanding some decisions from them and asking them questions why something wasn't done, or how come that something was done in a wrong way, or why we did something like this. And at some points I felt really embarrassed, maybe, because, well, in my culture, we have this mentality of a very strict vertical power, vertical structure of power. And it's very unusual for us when we can freely ask hard questions and demand something from people who are on higher positions, like product owners, for example. But so sometimes when you are taking these extra responsibilities, you have to be brave. You have to take this courage and be strict to people whose positions are higher than yours, because that is actually your job. Yeah. So we talked about what extra responsibilities you can take. We talked about problems that you might face when you take these extra responsibilities. And so let's think now how we can avoid these problems, or how we could at least mitigate the negative effects of these problems. Yes, so, well, the fashionable word that was actually used in the title of my presentation, end-to-end responsibility. What I think of when I think of end-to-end responsibility, so, well, the analogy is with end-to-end tests, right? So when an end-to-end scenario is created, it goes through some user flow from the very beginning to the very end. And it is also true for your responsibilities, for your activities. So whenever you do something, especially when it is beyond your usual responsibilities, be extra cautious, be extra careful, and follow up. Demand from people to update you, update others, and never treat any task like, I've done it, now I can just forget about it and I'm not going back to it at all. Never. That is something you cannot afford, because in the end, you will end up forgetting something, missing something, and your overall workflow will be not productive, will be not effective. And if you start doing something, it should be done till the very end. So let's talk about an example with configurations that I provided in the beginning, when we had to change the configuration so that it's not starts with, but contains. So let's say you change the configuration file and you created PR, you ask for reviews, and you cannot just forget about it after that. So you have to make sure that you get reviews, that this config file gets to master, that it gets tagged with a proper fixed version, and that it gets deployed to your next environment after all. So that is what I mean when I say end-to-end responsibility. Or another example, if during a release assessment meeting, if you're into release management, you're requiring some updates about an issue that might be a hot fix for the next release. Then after the meeting, if you are responsible for release management, you cannot just forget about it. Then you have to ping the person responsible, follow up on that again and again if needed, demand some actions, update other people, write emails, ping people again, and so on, until this very issue gets resolved, because it's your responsibility. Yes, the next step is demanding transparency and reporting. It's pretty hard to teach people, to make them do it, to report all the time. And it is especially hard in geographically distributed teams, and we will talk about it a bit later. So every workflow becomes a bit more successful once everything gets reported and once everyone understands why, when something was done, what was done, what were the reasons behind it, and so what is the follow-up. Second pair of eyes is a must. This is probably not true for activities such as release management, being a Scrum Master, and others soft skills related things, but it is true for hard skills related things. So until you are very good at something, do not do it alone. First of all, humans are fallible, and you might miss something, you might make a mistake, you might be just not trained enough on this specific topic. So it's always better to have an extra pair of eyes, like to have another person doing something with you. Not necessarily doing it together, but like someone just looking what you're doing silently, and then if you're doing something wrong, then this person can guide you and can tell you about it. So in this case, it should be someone who is better than you, which is sometimes a problem because, again, it requires more capacity. So it means that instead of one people time, you get two people times. The other reason why this should be done is that the other member of your team gets educated. So in this case, you are the one who is more trained. You're the one who is looking and then guiding the person, showing mistakes and so on. Knowledge sharing is the key. I don't know if it is a common practice in your companies. In my company, we have knowledge sharing sessions once per 2 weeks. And we find it pretty effective. So for every session, we get 2-3 presenters. Usually I make some kind of surveys for people during this 2 weeks period of time, asking them what was something interesting they were working on, what were some problems that they faced during solving some issues. For that, you have to be you have to know what is going on, not only in your team, but also in different teams. What is going on some global scale about vision of the company, what is going on with the product itself, so that you know which areas to point. Also, good candidate for knowledge sharing is something that was hot-fixed. It doesn't matter if it was a test or production environment. Everything is good for learning. Also, production incidents for sure require knowledge sharing. Well, first of all, you will get post-mortem for that, of course, but then knowledge sharing session would be also good to learn about the mistakes that were made. Yeah, don't be afraid not to follow exactly what is written in the books. You know, I'm reading a book now, preparing for ISTQB Advanced Test Manager certificate. And the author wrote in that book, I don't remember exactly what was the topic, but it was something like, this is the correct way how we do this, and this. But in 20 years of my career, I've never seen any company doing it, following these steps. So yes, theory is good, and of course we have to base our workflows on theory, but you are actually free to combine approaches, to use several approaches at once, to try and then to abandon if it doesn't work for you. It's fine. In the end, what is the most important? That the workflow works for you, for the team, for your project, for your company, then for your product, clients are happy, and your end user doesn't care what approach you use. So it's fine when you try, and then if it doesn't work, you try something else. Don't be afraid to make some changes, and don't be afraid to do some new things if they're not written in books. The main thing is that it works for you. And the last part I want to touch is working in a geographically distributed team, which became very relevant recently due to all the situation in the world. So what things you should consider? Time zones. In my country, it's usually a problem when we work with clients from the USA, because then if our presence is needed, people have to shift their work schedule to some later time, and not everyone wants to do that. And it depends on every company, but like in your team, you usually decide like if people work by some specific time zone, or people just do their job and then they don't care what time zone other members of their team are in. So if you have team members who are in different time zones from yours, just be polite about it. Remember that, okay, this person is like 5 hours away from me. Maybe I shouldn't text at this time, or ping and ask to test this ticket or something like that. Yeah, so let's be kind to each other and think about such things. The next one is communication. It's always better to over-communicate, even when you think that something was already said several times. Even if you think that you would look stupid if you say it again, it's always better to say something again. Because in the end, there are so many cases when people just make assumptions, and assumptions don't work because there is some spoiled phone, as we call it, and everyone understood something in their own way, and again, workflow is broken. Lack of trust can happen if your team or different teams are working in different offices, and there can be even a situation when you never met each other. In such case, it's pretty difficult to build trust between such teams, because you don't see the people in their day-to-day life. You don't know how they behave. You only see the text or video calls and so on, but that's not enough. And in the end, you might translate some of their words to aggressive behavior. You might think that they're implying something that they don't imply. And in the end, it gets really bad for the team. So lack of trust is something that has to be fought, and it's something that each team has to consider. Yeah, and increased need of calls and video calls. Again, it depends on the team, on the project, on the company policy. Like, for example, in my company, we always use video calls. So I would say it's pretty obligatory for us to use our video camera when we are at work. And I know that there are many people who are pretty opposed to it. Some people even furious about it. I honestly cannot understand it. I think it's fine, and I like to see people on the screens because there is so much about body language, gestures, intonation, and so on. And this is, I believe, is the most effective when you're working in a geographically distributed team. So to end up this, if you're thinking about expanding your area of responsibility, about taking some extra responsibilities, what you actually should think about is not what is making you excited at work. You actually should think about what annoys you at work, what you want to change, what you hate about some workflows. And then you can think what I can do about it. I believe that that is more effective. And probably because it is also related to our mindset. Like, you know, that usually the stereotype that all developers are positive and all QAs are negative. So let's be negative. Let's think about what annoys us and let's change it. And you will gain more power, more visibility, and more money in the end. That's all. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions.
Thank you a lot, Yana. Great presentation. I love the style. And I can tell you that the contexts we work in and we live in are quite different. I'm going to give you a reading of some of the questions we have in the YouTube channel. One of them is from Roberto, who is asking which one would be the soft skills you are particularly talking about.
Well, so if we are talking about my examples of the release management or being a Scrum Master, it is about proactivity, about punctuality, about, well, I'm not sure whether courage can be a soft skill, but well, why not? Well, yeah, it depends on what area you select, and actually there is no specific set of skills, right? It also depends on what kind of personality you are, and you might be very good at something and very bad at something, and there is a possibility that you select an area which you're interested in, but you don't have enough skills to develop it. Then you have several skills to learn. Or there is a possibility that you are already very good and you already have everything for this extra role. So you just take it and you do it and you are excellent. So this is all very situation specific, not something that can be generalized, I think.
Yep, perfect. Good answer, I would say. There is one from the chat. It's also from Roberto, who asks us if all members of a squad or a tribe must be empowered or have other skills. How important do you think this is?
I wouldn't say that there is something as must in this case, unless it is written in company policy, something that you discussed in your job interview, maybe. And I think it's pretty fair, and it's okay if you don't want it. It's fine. Because there are different types of people, and some people like to dive deeply into one topic and become experts. And some people like to get many small topics at once and be not experts, but just good at them. So in the end, it depends on your own goals and on the company you're working on. So, well, if you see that the company doesn't want you to get some extra things and you want, or it's vice versa, you don't want and company wants you to take them, then just change the company and find the one which suits you the most. I mean, there is always a place for everyone with whatever goals you have.
Thank you. We have another couple of questions from Franza. One of them is about your knowledge sharing sessions. Are they only for the QA team or are other teams involved? And related to this one is how many participants do you have in those sessions?
So it depends. We have different formats. So first format is knowledge sharing session for the whole company, which is currently 40 people. And we just publish like a schedule with topics that we will discuss, that we will knowledge share, and people just decide whether they want to attend or not, whether it would be useful for them to know in their day-to-day work or not. The other type is more like guild specific. We have front-end guild, back-end guild, QA guild. And so for that one, we have specific like channels in Slack. And so we discuss, okay, we want to get this specifically front-end topic for the knowledge sharing session. And then only members of front-end guild are joining because it will bring no use for other people.
Great. Thank you.
And in this case here, there would be like 10, 15 people.
Perfect. Thank you. We have Carlos Ivancic that's raising his hand. Go ahead, Carlos.
Hello, nice to meet you. In the case of the small startups, what are your recommendations? You know, because you have less people, less money, less time, how to approach of this?
I didn't know that startups have less money and less people, to be honest. I always thought that it's the opposite. I always thought that startups get a lot of funds. Yeah, I've never worked for startups, so to be honest, I don't know. Well, but in the end, it all depends on your initiative, on how inspired you are. I mean, everything that can be empowered in the company can happen. Like if all team members gather and decide that from now on they're going to have this practice in our workflow, then you don't need any like specific budget for that or more people. But yeah, as I said, I have never worked for startups, so I cannot be really like an expert here.
Thank you. And I think this is the last question we have. It's from Paolo. What do you think about job shadowing to learn or understand the role requirement of the job tasks?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand what is job shadowing.
I think it's almost like pair working or working with someone else when you are going behind the steps of somebody doing his work and trying to see how he does it, what he does, what his
I see. Yeah, like
so
yeah. Well, yeah, we were trying it when we started QA automation, and there is always no time for people to dive deeply into it. So we had specifically QA automation team, and then QA manual team was trying to get involved very hard, but you just spend 2 hours and then you get distracted and again and again. So in the end, we tried this approach when members of QA manual team were like just sitting beside and looking what QA automation team members were doing step by step. And it had some good results because they could understand the structure of the framework better. They could see how QA automation team members create like relations. What do they refer to in different files and so on. So I think it impacted a general understanding of the framework quite well. So yeah, generally, I think this is quite a good practice. Like, it depends on type of the person again, because some people cannot learn just by looking at someone doing something. So this is where some kind of people management knowledge has to come in, and you have to understand whether your team members can learn by looking, or they need specific training, or they have to try by themselves.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Jana, for your presentations, for being here, for being part of this community, for taking the time of sharing your knowledge from all over the world. So we hope to have you around again. And thank you again. Thank you, everyone. There is another question we have there, but we are running out of time. We have to switch the place. So I'm sorry about that one. We're going to keep it in mind for the next time. So
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jana.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored that you let me be presenter here. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
You too. Good evening.